Compensation is a topic in HR that regularly creates high emotions and high stakes. Today, we're going to talk about an aspect of it, and that's compensation philosophies. That's coming up now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub, and on the show, we talk about anything related to HR. Please subscribe to the show or to the podcast to keep learning from my amazing guests. Today, my guest is Carolyn Kildare. Carolyn is the owner of a compensation consultancy called Cadence. She worked for Mercer for years as a senior consultant. She's the vice chair of a local compensation association called the Calgary Total Rewards Network. So with all of that, she's eminently qualified to help us with this topic. Hi, Carolyn. How are you?
Great. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Nice to have you on the show. And as usual, I just dive right in. So, compensation philosophies,
Mhm.
where should we start?
So, organizations often don't start really thinking about compensation and its role in their broader talent processes until they have a reason. Something happens. Maybe a few critical employees left because they got job offers that they couldn't refuse. They were paying more. Or they've had great candidates who said, sorry, not going to do it because the compensation offer wasn't enough. Maybe sometimes there's a reason that comes from outside, like changing regulations. Organizations that are publicly traded or going through public trading have to often start thinking about their compensation philosophy because that's one of the aspects that's included in a public filing. Management information circulars carry information around what's your compensation philosophy. And while that's typically oriented specifically to the executive suite, the strategy and thinking behind compensation should be reasonably consistent through all levels of your organization. So often you start because you have to, not because you wake up one day and go, oh, I really need a compensation philosophy. You actually think, I have a problem, and it seems to be something about compensation, and I need to fix it. And fixing it starts with thinking about what is it I'm trying to achieve? Why am I trying to achieve it? That's what the compensation philosophy is intended to provide that perspective on.
Or what is a compensation philosophy, and why should organizations have one?
It's a statement of the principles that govern how and who and where and why you have all the elements that make up that relationship you have with your people. That's about what you are trading between you. So they do work, you provide them with rewards to say thank you for doing that work. And all of the different ways in which you can put that offer and those rewards together say something about who you are as a company, the talent that you want, and where the business is going. So it's a strategy. It's sort of the statement of principles, and often the question that comes in to say, well, why would I need this? Well, if you don't know where you're going, any road's going to get you there. So you kind of have to figure out first, where am I going? What what is it that I need to be able to figure out, to be able to start making some answers around what do I need to do to get the right people on the team?
Okay. What questions does a good compensation philosophy answer?
So we can kind of think of it as being that who, what, when, where, how kind of framework. So, firstly, is who? Who am I paying for? What are the skills that we need to have? What level of skill do we need to have? Do we need world experts? Do we need people straight out of university? Do I have different kinds of employees inside my company that might need different approaches? Am I going to be consistent between the person who's working in the factory and the person who is in the director's chair? Um, there's a lot of different aspects around the people on your team and the practices for compensation within each one of those. So you need to be thinking about your talent strategy and who it is that you are looking to market your company to, because you are competing. You are marketing your organization against all of the other potential competitors for that same talent. Who is it that you want to have, and then what are you paying for? Do you want to be meeting the market? I'm going to be P50. I'm going to meet the market on everything. That's a really critical decision to say, I want to pay competitively against who? How are you thinking about where you might have competitors for that talent? And is it going to be the same competitors for all of the people? Or are you potentially going to have different types of competitors for different parts of your workforce? And how important is it that people are paid equally? Do you have an equal pay for equal work? Do you go purely for market value? You can have two jobs that are much the same, but they could have really different pay if you take a truly market-driven approach. We often get really caught up by the how. What's the base salary going to look like? Is there a bonus? And what's the bonus payout look like? What's the link between pay and performance? Are there going to be opportunities to get stock options? And if so, what's the time frame for those? So there's a huge series of different elements that can be dialed up, dialed down, emphasized, strengthened, depending on who it is that you're attracting and what it is that you're paying for.
Yeah, I think often, at least with my clients, they struggle with that dilemma, the equal versus market.
Yes.
Do you have any quick insights on that?
There is a real philosophy or a real challenge because we want to be fair.
Yes.
And so part of that decision around being fair is about understanding, how do I maybe group things together so that we've got a bucket that has similar characteristics. So everybody who's been in the workforce for 5 years is a bucket. So somebody who's a world expert, you can create your different buckets. And then looking at all the individual people within that bucket and saying, how consistent or similar is what the market thinks those skills are worth? The market values some skills very highly. And again, like any market, it's supply and demand driven. So if you have skills that are in hot demand and are scarce, they're going to be more highly paid than skills that are considered to be easily found in the market. And the balancing point for organizations is to be able to say, I need to make sure that my range, the opportunity that I have for compensation opportunities within this bucket, enables me to attract both the highly desired, sought after skills that are really critical, as well as making sure that it's not overpaying the folks where some of those skills might be more easily found. There's a
So,
balancing point.
yeah, so what you're saying is in your pay scale, you should have bands and bands that are wide enough to accommodate market demand.
Yes. And you can slice and dice that a little bit. That's another conversation again. But it just comes back to balancing out sometimes, and particularly over the last couple of years, the balancing out has been, how do I balance between hot skills that are high priced right now because there's a shortage versus the people who have been on my team for, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, and they have been through with me on, all sorts of ups and downs, but I haven't moved their pay at the same rate as the market has moved. And so for me to replace a person who's been around for a long time, I might be paying more for somebody new.
Yeah.
That's a real challenge. That's where a lot of internal equity issues have been over the last few years.
It's been a theme on the channel.
Yes. It's a
Is
continuing problem.
Yeah, like don't pay your internal employees less because they stay with you than you pay for people who apply for jobs.
Yeah, I think about that in kind of one of the ways to stop that problem from happening in the first place is to really think about the fact that if you have a salary range, whatever your range is, the middle of that range, the midpoint of that range is what you would say is, this is what the market is paying for somebody who is fully proficient, totally up to skills, know what they're doing. Often when somebody gets hired, they get hired in below that because there's an assumption that they're going to need to have some training. And the objective is to say, well, I'm going to reward them for that skill development, such as that there is a time frame at which they are fully skilled in this particular job and they're at market rate. The challenges have come when people haven't been moved around that range to reflect their skill development. And so there's definitely some aspects there that say that if you are managing your people and recognizing that tenure has value, novelty might not have. Novelty is one set of values, but people who know what they're doing, you count on them. Don't take them for granted. Make sure that you are paying for those skills what some competitor across the road would also pay for those skills.
Hey, business owners, executive directors, are people stresses or challenges getting in your way? Imagine managing your people issues smoothly, addressing, better yet, dealing with employee problems before they're ever a big problem, adapting to all the changes in employee rules, and doing all of this easily. I can deal with your HR challenges so they're resolved. With me, you'll get the right things done, build a strong team, and create a workplace where the right people want to be. Your business deserves to thrive without a lot of HR hassle. I'm here to help you make that happen. With my assistance, you can focus on business growth supported by a strong team. Take a first step towards a better business today. Reach out and let's chat. Visit thehrhub.ca and let's begin transforming your people challenges. Do you have any examples? Can you think of an example of a comp philosophy off the top of your head? Like, is this a statement? Does it you turn out a statement, 3 sentences and that's your comp philosophy? Like, I don't even know.
So if you Google a compensation philosophy, you'll get lots of examples that come up. Often they'll come up, ones that'll come up will be parts of annual reports, and they'll be mostly about your executives. And so how much they're going to get in stock options and what are the performance thresholds. And it will say, what is my peer group and how do I compare against my peer group? So the key elements to a compensation philosophy at its very basic is to say, what's the purpose? What's my statement of values that I'm bringing to compensation that are part of my organizational values? So that your compensation, the way you act with your people, is consistent with how you act with any other stakeholder in your corporate environment. Right? Because after all, your employees are a key stakeholder group for you. You have to be thinking of them and being consistent in your practices.
I was just thinking of an example though, like if you really, if maybe one of your values, let's say for example, is competition,
Yep.
and competing to be the best or something,
Yep.
that you would reward your
Right.
best employees, but and that you have a culture of competition.
That's right. So in which case your overarching statement may be we at XYZ organization value the contributions that our employees make when they are performing at their best, and we reward them with above market compensation to acknowledge we are a performance led organization and we provide higher than market short term incentives to encourage and reward people for outstanding efforts.
Right. Yeah.
So that's an example where you can say a performance orientation then leads to saying, how do I reward performance? What are the characteristics of what that reward might look like?
Could have a totally separate conversation about the merits and success of a performance-based culture, but anyways.
Exactly. And that is one of the real challenges. It's like it's one thing to say we're a performance driven company, but you have to have how you back it up. If you're going to be a performance related organization, you should have a really good performance management plan. You should be really clear on what kind of performance you're reporting. Is it company performance? Is it team performance? Is it individual performance? How are you coaching your employees to set those goals and working with them to achieve them over the course of the year? I mean, there's a whole lot of things that say it's not just making a statement we're performance driven. It's another to say, how do I make this real?
make this real in their compensation package, which as I said at the beginning, is a very emotional, high stakes topic. You were just there leading into the idea of, well, all the things that an employer might have in place before ever trying to determine what their comp philosophy is.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Is there what should they have in place?
Well, business strategy,
Okay.
sense of your talent strategy. What do you need to do for and with your people? Um, and then a really clear idea of what's not working. What actually are the problems that you're facing? Because those will give you a clue as to the areas that you need to address. Those are your pain points.
Do you have an example, like a problem, you know, that when you had this discussion about what problems are you facing and that it just trickled into the comp philosophy?
So it might say we want to be competitive. We need to be competitive against peers. Okay, so this comes back to who are the organizations that you're competing with for talent? Can you name them? Why are they your competitors? Are the competitors that you're facing for your talent the same at the executive suite as they are maybe for your receptionist? And if they're not exactly the same, do they have characteristics that you would expect to be consistent? Industry sector might be one of those consistency things. Geography might be something that would also determine what your peer group is. Am I going to scour the planet for organizations that are comparable to myself, or am I going to be thinking about organizations that are in my backyard? So, thinking about who am I competing with for talent?
I have so many questions that I can't ask. Is it got related to compensation philosophy, and that'll take us so out of the range. But one of those questions, and please don't answer it, but is what happens when like in IT, the market comes crashing down. And so you've been paying them an arm and a leg for a long time, and now what are you not? Anyway, another conversation for another time. Uh, when you are putting to working with clients to create their compensation philosophy,
Mhm.
what part of it is the hardest for you?
So, the typical process of developing a compensation philosophy, because of the way it links back to business strategy, is to be working directly with senior leaders, often the executives, and asking questions around where's your business going? What kinds of challenges are you facing with attracting and retaining the right kind of people? Asking a set of structured questions that then lead to those principles that say, okay, so our reference group for talent is this sort of set of organizations, and this is where I might find them. But actually getting and working with those executives to think about the people related aspects of their overall business strategy and really understanding where the impacts on the teams that they're leading come from. So there is a degree to which that's hard because often when we're thinking about corporate strategy, let's look at my P&L and I want to look at my ROI, and it's very focused on the business results, but the business results are delivered by the people. What are the people issues that you need to make sure are in place to get the business results you want? And the second element that's really hard, we talked about this before, is backing up your statements with action. You can't just have a motherhood and apple pie statement. I want to be everything to everybody. You can't be everything to everybody. You have a culture, you have a vision, you have a reason for being, and you have a way in which you do that. And that has to be evident all the way through every aspect of your relationships, including with your employees. And so, if you want to be performance driven, be prepared for what that actually means. What does it mean to make sure that you have a performance management program, that you have a bonus program that might give really different rewards to different people, that might have a trigger point that says, company didn't make enough money this year, nobody gets a bonus. Those sorts of things that are the tangible outcomes of what that principle is.
As you were talking there, I was thinking about a presentation I went to because you and I have been talking about planning and preparation, but at this presentation, they were making the point that you take the next step. And sometimes you don't have all your It's not all organized, it's not all ready. You just take the next step and you pick up the pieces as you go. And I feel like comp philosophy is a little bit like this, but it might drive some of those other activities. Or if you do want to be a performance based culture, well, compensation is one piece of it, but that's not the only piece.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. We are getting to the end of this, running out of time to talk more. Uh, if someone wants to learn more about compensation philosophy, what do you suggest?
I'd say you can Google a few different ones online. To be perfectly honest, when I'm looking at and researching and thinking about philosophies, I will look around and see what are some executive philosophies that are out there. What are some American ones? What are some Canadian ones? Um, it can be really educational to look at different ways of approaching it. Some organizations write really detailed plans and say when I'm going to do this and how I'm going to do this and all the different components that are within it. Others have a very brief statement of principles. Even just the choice of what aspects of a comp philosophy are going to be included in your philosophy. For example, we talked a bit about internal equity. If internal equity is a really key principle for you, you may want to make sure that you address internal equity directly in your philosophy. Look at how other organizations have done that. There are different approaches to it. Same as transparency. Yeah, it's an issue. Having a statement, a set of principles, a governing kind of direction in how you want to handle transparency, both from an inside the organization and from an outside the organization perspective, that's part of your philosophy. And again, do some research around how are other organizations stating their principles around how they're going to treat this issue.
Hmm. Yeah, that transparency one's a sticky one. We all, it'd be nice if everybody else was transparent, but I don't want to be transparent.
That's right. There's a huge range of different practices, and organizations really vary in the degree when it comes to transparency to which they want to be leading with that. So the degree to which they want to take a compliance based approach. That has a lot to do with their talent. Who's working for them because it's going to be their employees and their employees' questions that really at the end they dictate how the company has to respond on that particular issue.
Well, thanks, Carolyn. I am thinking about the compensation philosophy in terms of my initial statement that it's high stakes, high emotional kind of topic. There's nothing people get mad about faster than their compensation, if that should be wrong. And a compensation philosophy can stem some of that. So I do think it's important. I did episodes on base pay and incentive pay, and the links to those are right there. Thanks for watching out there, and we'll see you next time.